Welcome back, everybody. It's Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Board Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying, and I'm here to bring you another quick tie, sponsored by Rocky Mountain Fly Shop. Today we are going to be going through the Sculpzilla Natural. Great little sculpin fly, pretty simple pattern. I will be tying out of my Season 5 kit. Hopefully you're tying out of yours as well. If you don't already have one, you can head over to our website and grab one, www.flyfishingboardbird.com/TNLS5. You can grab yours today. I'm going to be tying, this is the individual kit you can see that comes out of there, Season 5. We are on Episode 10, and we are doing the Sculpzilla Natural, which is one of the two packages you see in the back there. All right, don't forget, like and subscribe to this video. Hit that little bell, it'll notify you every week when we have a couple new videos for you. And drop a comment if you're part of the Quick Tie Squad, because we want to know that you were here and what you thought of the video. Without further ado, let's head on over to the vise and we'll get started. As you can see, flies in right here. We're going to be making that same one here in just a second. Okay, so we tie off a couple of different hooks on this fly. So we're going to put in the rear, or hook, sorry. So we're going to put in the rear hook first. This is a little bit smaller hook. This is a size 6 streamer hook, okay? We're going to use this as the back kind of trailing hook on this fly. There's two ways of doing it with the two different hooks. You can either cut the hook point off the leading fly and kind of use it as a shank, or you can leave it on as well. We'll show you when we get to there. So actually very few materials in this sculpin pattern. Quite simple to tie, but we're going to take you through it step by step and teach you this one. So we got some natural colored rabbit zonker here. Okay, I'm just going to leave it a nice long strip. I actually just, as I go through and I keep tying, I just keep working my way up the strip to get a few different more flies out of it. So when I'm first going to tie this in, I want to measure about half of this hook shank, so it's a shorter hook shank. About half of that is going to be hanging off the back almost as the trailing tail. And when I find my spot there, what I want to do is I want to separate that rabbit fur. You can see there's all that under fur until you get down to leather. So once I kind of find the spot that I like, moisten your fingers, a little saliva or a little water, whatever you got on you. And that's going to help lay it back and kind of out of the way a little bit for you. Then just center it right on top of the hook shank, okay, just before the bend. And let's go ahead and get a couple wraps. I like to use my opposite hand to start with here. Grab a couple of wraps, I'm gonna pinch down, pull it nice and tight, and then I'm gonna keep working a few thread wraps around, just making sure that this isn't gonna go anywhere. We're gonna connect this in a couple places on this hook shank, so not too worried about it. It's important that we separate that out so that we don't end up securing any of those individual fur portions that we actually wanna use in this fly and have for movement. So now I'm just gonna pull this up and I'm just gonna work a nice thread base down, just covering up the hook shank so we don't have any of that kind of shiny bits coming through. So just a nice even underbody, not trying to build up any bulk or anything, just covering up the hook itself. When we get up to the hook eye, I'm then gonna bring this back over top and I'm gonna repeat that again. The same process I did in the back. I'm gonna find a place that's right behind that eye where I can tie this in. I'll separate the fur once again. I'm gonna bring my thread over, get that kind of first wrap to secure it in place. Kind of an awkward thing working with your other hand here, but this is how it's a little easier to just kind of hold the material out of the way for yourself so you're not accidentally securing any of that down. Then again, I'm going to pinch and pull because we want this to stay right up on top of that hook shank if we can. Now I'm going to pull that back and just take a few thread wraps in front of that eye. Then from here, I'm going to go ahead and grab my half hitch tool, or you could whip finish here, whichever you choose, over the eye. Do it a couple times, just like that. And we are good to snip out our thread, and we're gonna, just like that, move forward to the next hook that we're tying on. Now this next hook, if you do plan on trimming it out, so I can show you, we have a couple of ways of doing it. You can leave that front hook in, okay, so you can see there's two hooks in there. I kind of prefer this, but if you wanna trim out that front one and just have a trailing hook, you can do that as well. And that would look more like this, where you can see we've actually trimmed out the hook on the underside, and then you just have your trailing hook. Either or is fine, but doesn't really change how we tie the fly. We'll pop that out. We'll go ahead and we'll grab our next hook, which is going to be, excuse me, a size 4 long shank on this one, because we want a little bit of a longer shank to work with on this fly, on this front portion. I'm going to, actually, before I do that, I better get my cone on there. So we've got a gold cone that fits to size on the hook. This is a large size cone. Okay, once I get that in there, I'm going to start my thread just in front of the cone. I'm going to work it all the way back, just laying some thread wraps down on the hook shank. We're about to put a connecting material in here, and we don't want it to slip around on us. I'll go ahead and trim that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab that heavy piece of mono we have, kind of brown colored mono. I'm going to start by tying this in right on top of the hook shank, making sure that tag end is secure. And now I'm going to work this forward, or rearward, sorry, all the way back to the edge of the bend. Then from here, I'm going to go ahead and grab that big chunk of fur that I have my hook tied in already. I'm going to come in here and just place this right through the eye from the bottom, back up to the top, and then bend it back forward. Now I want to create a little bit of distance between the back portion and the front, but not a crazy distance. I don't want it to be as long as that hook shank. I would say about half of that front hook shank in length out the back, somewhere in there. And then I'm going to pinch that down so it doesn't move. Get a couple thread wraps on top of it, and then I will get some thread wraps moving forward, trying to keep that mono kind of near the top end of the fly or on the side of the hook shank. Then I'm going to double that back over. This is just a little bit of added security that that's not going to slip out on me. And once I've got a decent amount of thread wraps down on top of that, I can go ahead and trim it out, like so. And then I want to work my thread back to just before the bend. So on this style of hook, it's going to sit right about at the hook barb, okay? Now I can bring this back forward again. You can see I have it attached on that center portion, so I'm going to decide how much and where I secure this fur. But I want to pull on the back portion of the fly because I don't want to have it tied so tight that I pull the tail up and it sits like that. I want it to sit down with just a little bit of slack. Not too much, but just a little. So once I find that spot, and I think I've got it, go once again, separate the fur so you can get yourself a tie-in point. Double check it before you tie it in again. Okay, I got some wiggle room there. That's what I like. Try to get this fur to stay out of the way. Just going to moisten it a smidge. Then I'll come in and I'll get that thread wrap on there. Couple just at first, and I can kind of recenter that, making sure that that rabbit fur is right up on top of the hook shank. Gonna take 4 or 5 good thread wraps there. Again, pinch, pull that tight. And I'm gonna pull this back and put a couple more thread wraps in front. Now this is just gonna kind of be in the way for a moment, so I'm gonna go ahead and set this behind. You can use a hair clip or whatever, or material clip, and just hold that out of the way. Now I'm gonna go over to this brown dubbing that you have in your kit, and we're just gonna lay a nice little under layer on top of the thread wraps we have there with this dubbing. We're not gonna get too crazy. We don't need anything fancy. Doesn't have to be a perfectly tapered underbody. We're just gonna basically cover up that thread with a little bit of a reddish brown colored underbody. So I'm just doing a quick dubbing noodle. Remembering when I spin this on, fingers always go in the same direction. We're not playing a little violin and going back and forth. Otherwise we would just basically be wax on, wax off, taking the dubbing right back off. So once I've got about a 4 inch, maybe that's 8 or 10, I don't know, but it's probably 4 inches worth of dubbing noodle, I'm gonna start wrapping this forward. Okay. Work it all the way forward. I need to leave myself a little bit of space just behind that cone because I'm going to put in a collar. So as long as it finishes somewhere in that region, I can always put some thread wraps back over top of it. But I like where that's sitting. I wanted just that little bit of space behind the cone, and that's where I'm going to tie my zonker back in on top of. So I'll go ahead and remove that material clip or that hair clip, and I can pull this back forward. And now once again, for the 4th time, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to find that spot that we want. Another little trick to doing this is if you've got yourself a bodkin. A bodkin can be really nice for just coming in and basically poking that fur and separating it out. So you can a little bit easier get the spot you want right away. Separate that, getting that spot that I want. Again, I'm going to moisten it just a smidge, kind of hold it back. And then I'll go ahead and secure this again. Same kind of way I did before. I'll take those 4 or 5 wraps, just holding it in place, and then I can switch hands, pull down, make sure I got that good and secure. A couple more wraps, and now we're actually going to trim this out. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my scissors. I will trim out that leather portion. The under portion is kind of as closely as I can. You can see it's just kind of laying out over top of that cone just a little bit. So I'll tip the cone up, and now it'll go inside the cone when I finish making these thread wraps. And I want to really work that down. I'm gonna work my thread back just a smidge, giving me room for that collar. And as we're sitting, that's kind of where you should be. Actually a very fishable fly even as it is, but we're going to put a little collar. So we're going to use a material we haven't used on the show before. This is a guinea fowl feather, okay? We're going to use this, and this isn't orange. We're going to use this basically to simulate some gills. We're going to put a piece of marabou on top of that as well, but this is just going to give us a little bit of a kind of a bloody colored gill just to simulate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and pinch just at the very tip. I'm going to pull those fibers on the stem back down and just expose basically just the very tip like that. I'm going to turn it so the underside of the feather is pointed back down the fly, and I'm going to tie that in just in front of the fur. And I really want to make sure I got this secured down, so I'm going to work some thread wraps in front of that butt section and over top. Really make sure that's very much secured in there. I can trim out that little tag. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wrap this forward. So if you wanted, you could grab some hackle pliers. This is a decently long feather, so I can get a hold of it. I want to probably do a full 2 wraps if I can get it, but making sure I'm not trapping any of those fibers on there, I'm going to just kind of pull them forward. But as soon as we get to the fuzzy portion of the feather, that's when we're done. We don't want to use any of the fuzz. We just wanted those nice, kind of firm portions of that feather. So a couple wraps behind, couple in front. Once I'm sure that's good and secure, I can come in and trim out that stem like so. Now, it doesn't look perfect right now. It kind of looks kind of blotchy and all over. That's okay. I'm just going to lay those feathers back down and take a couple more thread wraps to kind of encourage them to all go rearward. Okay, so you can see there, now I got a pretty good coverage all the way around the fly. They're all kind of pointed back. And now I'm going to go to the last piece of the puzzle, and that's going to be 1 piece of marabou. Okay, so we've got a piece of marabou. We're going to tie this in probably a way we haven't done or shown before. I'm going to go down to the very bottom and get rid of those fluffies that are right at the bottom. I know most of it's completely fluffy, but just getting rid of the very bottom portion of the feather, just so I know I'm not working with that, but I have something to grab onto. Then I'm going to grab the feather like this. I'm going to go to the tip of the feather, and I'm actually going to draw it back and down like so. Expose just the very tip, and I'm going to tie that tip in right at the stem. Basically the exact same way we just did with this last feather. And we're actually going to do a couple wraps of palmering with a marabou, which isn't something we normally use it for. We've only really used it for tails, and you know, in normal tying, we don't normally palmer this. So it is a delicate stem, so you don't want to pull hard when you do this. But once I got that in there, I'm going to do the same thing I did as with that other feather. I really want to lay some thread wraps and make sure that that's secure in there. Once I'm happy with that, now I'm just going to loosely, with a little bit of moist fingers, encourage those fibers to go rearward and back down the fly. And I'm going to do 1 complete wrap. You could go 2, but then you might cover up a little bit more than you want to of the guinea fowl. And then you basically got to try to separate the stem and those fibers so you can find a place to tie it off. Just like that, without trapping too many of the individual fibers. It's going to look kind of funny for a moment until we get this tied off. And then I'm just going to grab basically all of it and pull it back a bit. Make sure I got some good thread wraps right at the front. And then I can trim out that stem. Like so. Now it looks pretty bushy at the moment. Again, moisten your fingers slightly. Stroke it back and down the fly, and you're going to see how that's going to lay down really nice. It gives us a nice collar. There's going to be a ton of movement there. You should be able to just see a little bit of that orange coming through on the underside of that collar. Now at this point, all I got to do is go ahead and whip finish this fly. I'm going to do a couple of good whip finishes and not worry about any resin, because resin on top of marabou does not normally lead to a very good day. And it'll just mess up the fly. So a couple of whip finishes, 3 or 4 turns. Go ahead, trim out the tag end of your thread. And there you have it, guys. That is your Sculpzilla Natural. Again, put a little bit of moisture on it. You're going to be able to see how that fly is going to look. Looks awesome. Great pattern. Great little sculpin pattern. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and just trim off that front hook, or you could leave it on there and have a double hook fly as well. Totally up to you. All right, guys, this has been Tim here with Fly Fishing Board Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. Thank you again for tuning in to this quick tie. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This has been the Sculpzilla. Can't wait to get back next week and show you another fly.